link. Some people then within 5 minutes, right? You heard the story. Some people got it in April. Some people never got through.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I was at the Times. Where are you going, to SUNY or the Times Union Center?
SUNY.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched them assemble the tent over there, so they're up and running now.
So what used to be called the pumpkin patch.
Right.
That's the corner because everything was purple or everything was going to be orange.
Hmm.
So,
Well, I think we can call the meeting to order.
yeah,
I see we've got Aaron Tobin and Amy Levine. All right. Well, I'll call this meeting to order. This is the regular scheduled meeting of the Historic Resources Commission of the City of Albany. We are meeting this evening in a public workshop session, and we'll be discussing items related to the preservation plan. This evening we have,
Oops.
I lost everybody. Where'd they go?
Sorry, John, hold on. Go ahead.
Okay. We have in attendance myself, John Myers, the chair, Commissioner McEnany, Commissioner Pinckney, Commissioner Hacker, Commissioner Kaplan, Commissioner Tobin, Aaron Glennon from the, Aaron Glennon from the planning office, and Amy Levine from the law department, making sure we stay within bounds. And with that, I will hand it over to Aaron to begin the proceeding or the discussion.
Thanks, John. I wanted to take tonight and go through and discuss and hopefully set up some goals to implement for 2021 from the Historic Preservation Plan, and also go over some of the items that the planning department has been working on internally that are ongoing or kind of under construction on our end. As you've all seen, the implementation portion of the preservation is fairly large, and it'll, not only will the planning department be carrying out a lot of this, we're going to need involvement from you all as well as our local organizations and partners.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you do have questions, I'm going to run through this fairly quickly. If you do have questions, feel free to stop me, or if you just want to wait, we can have kind of a broader discussion at the end. So in the memo that I had sent out to you all, I had outlined kind of the 4 goal sections from the plan, and then action items from each of those sections and policies. Goal number 1 of the preservation plan is documentation, and action 1.2 is specific to early 20th century. This is residential, but both residential and commercial, for future listing on the National Register and local designation. So we have received funding from the State Historic Preservation Office. We applied for CLG funds, which is the Certified Local Government Funds, to do a intensive level historic resource survey of the Warehouse District. We will be shortly going out to release an RFP for consultant services for that. And we'll be hopefully wrapped up, we'll have to be wrapped up by the end of September 2021. So that is, there are a number of structures already designated individually to the National Register in that area. And after discussing with SHPO, we had decided that based off of the recommendations from the Lakota partners who did the preservation plan, that it would be something that would be easily achievable to carry out within the time frame of our short time frame within 2021. So we will be hiring a consultant to do that. Under goal 2, we're looking to review and enhance preservation policies. Last year, at the beginning of last year, John and I had started the discussion of creating rules and procedures for the Historic Resource Commission. This is something that the other land use boards, the Planning Board and Board of Zoning Appeals, already have. And so we thought it would be something that we could follow with and use the other boards to kind of help set up rules and procedures for the HRC. This would be kind of membership, how we pull and pull in members, how meetings are run, general how we establish the chair and the vice chair, speaker minutes, and how the meetings and workshops are run. So we have started to review the Planning Board and Board of Zoning Appeals rules and procedures. We thought that we could build off of that as well as kind of customize to the way that the HRC currently runs. And the goal would be to have those created and then brought to the HRC for review, comments, and then adoption. So hopefully that's something that we can do. I think it's something that's fairly simple that we can achieve during this year.
Hey, Aaron, can I tell you something? I like to establish that we have the opportunity to beat people up more than what we do.
We'll have to craft the language for that, but
Right.
we hear what you're saying.
Yeah, really hold their feet to the fire and make sure they're following the rules. So I think,
where's the mayor and the members of the Common Council? Because to become a member, you have to be approved by the Common Council, I assume, and be nominated by the mayor.
correct. Well, so, and we'll get to this, in the next action item. The mayor, the appointment for the chair comes from the mayor. And some of the membership for the board also comes from the mayor, and it does have to go through the Common Council to be approved.
Some is or all are?
Well, all the members have to be approved by Common Council.
Oh,
The chair position is an appointment by the mayor.
right. But
So,
aren't all the members nominated and then approved by the council? It's 100%. If in order to be
Yes.
a member, and then one of those gets to be designated by the mayor to be the chair.
correct.
Yeah, so it's all.
So one of the things that we also discussed with putting in, was, the appointment of the vice chair would be from, one of the things that we had discussed last year was the vice chair would be appointed by the commission. So, which I'm not sure if that was how it took place previously before I had started in 2016 or 2015. But, there's ways that we can work in kind of, customization of how the HRC would like to see, their vice chairs. One of the things, and this came up at the Common Council Land Use Committee, and it's been an ongoing discussion within the planning department, is appointment of members. And I would kind of like to see the assistance come from the Historic Resource Commission of creating a list of potential city residents who could, if we have vacancy, we currently have vacancy. The commission is supposed to be made up of 9 members. We currently only have 8. So, creating a list, and this, will be something that constantly changes, of potential new members. So if there's someone that, members, people that members know who have interest in, work within the field of historic preservation, have, a specialized knowledge, I think we can start to work to create a list to help fill, vacant positions as they come. If people decide to step down, then we'll be able to fill positions fairly quickly and easily. One of the things that came up at the Land Use Committee and we'll discuss this further at the next workshop, is that there's an amendment to the local law, chapter 42 of the HRC section that will put more or less, I think, a 30-day period on appointments. So, it will need to be a fairly quick turnaround. So having a list of potential new members would be very helpful. Action 2.9, this is something that I had brought up at the end of 2020, is also the creation, I would like to see kind of like a creation maybe of a list or database of training that you would all like to see the planning department schedule and coordinate. Also any type of educational discussions that you would all like to have. Being a certified local government, we have access to resources through the preservation office, the state preservation office, and can coordinate new training sessions. So I had kind of set a date in March. If you all have been thinking about things that you would like to discuss or training that you would like to have, if you could send me maybe 1 or 2, each of you send me 1 or 2 ideas that you've been thinking of, we can start to schedule and coordinate training and discussions and talks, especially now that we have workshops scheduled in now for the first Wednesday of each month. We will have the ability to kind of have a little bit more leniency to schedule things in than we did in the past. And this can
I thought we knew everything about historic preservation.
It's good to stay up to date on all the new trends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
On the statewide preservation conferences, through the CLG, they do offer scholarships or grants to pay some fees for it. And I know Chris and I went to the one in Rochester over a year ago, and they're very worthwhile. They have good sessions, and a lot of good information is available there.
Brad and I had discussed, whether they're, having somebody come in and talk about appropriate, infill in other, new construction in other communities and how they're approaching it. It could be, having someone come in and discuss, compare the different levels of review, state, federal, and local planning laws. Really, it can be anything on the ordinance. It could be energy efficiency. If there's something that you would either like training on or to discuss, feel free and we can go from there.
2 thoughts that I have. One is that I think we would do well and we would serve the projects that come before us well if we were current on the approach from the state office relative to some of our, more challenging items,
Mhm.
such as windows, window replacement, and probably alternate materials, although I think that somewhat is linked to new construction, Erin, which you already identified. But it would be really good to know on whatever list of materials that we struggle with to get their current approach to documentation or acceptable alternatives.
Okay.
Another thought would be, I don't feel like we're done with our understanding of the vacant building and the emergency demos. That's kind of as much of becoming part of the process with the city as it is understanding their procedures. But I think that's to engage in those conversations in a meeting kind of format might be very helpful.
Yes.
I just wanted to add, I had to mute for just a second, so I don't know if you mentioned this, Erin, but the Preservation League, and I'm not the one coordinating it, is doing a series of trainings this spring with the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions.
Okay.
So Christina Hingle is coordinating it, and it's geared to, it was supposed to be in the Hudson Valley, so it's kind of geared towards them first. They have first priority in registration, but it will open up. And I think that alternate materials is one of the sessions. It's 2 half days. So I can send that information around and then do with it what you will. I'm not promoting that you should sign up for the League's program, but it is information it seems worthy to share.
Okay. Yeah, and we've done that before. And anything like that, I can definitely share amongst the members. While we're on the topic of training, one of the other things, the planning board and the BCA both have integrated into the rules and procedures the requirement for members to carry out a certain amount of training every year. And that could be something that we could adopt into rules and procedures. And then things like the League's training or the statewide preservation conference could qualify for that training. And it's just making sure that, that you all are up to date on, the most recent reviews and procedures that are taking place statewide and nationally. So. But March, I believe our workshop for March is March 3rd. So if you all, have a couple, I would say 2, if you want to include more, feel free to send me kind of more ideas. Policy 3, goal 3, is maintenance and revitalization of our historic neighborhoods, residential and commercial. One of the action items that we've been working on and hopefully can kind of start the process on creating an implementation kind of roadmap for ourselves is conservation districts. This is something that we've kind of been going back and forth on. It's a big action item. And it is something that may not come to the Historic Resource Commission, but maybe treated as an overlay district that integrates with National Register nominations. If any of you are interested in this, we're kind of looking for help in either finding other communities that have implemented this type of district successfully. We do have citywide design guidelines, but the way that we're looking at conservation districts is that they would be more specific to the neighborhood. Residents could designate the area and kind of also customize regulations for them. It may be neighborhoods where there's been a significant loss of historic materials, or where they may not qualify to be locally designated, but this would be an added layer of protection to, save and preserve any remaining historic fabric.
We have an example of anything nearby that functions? Because I could see where two boards could be competing with one another, one for historic preservation, the other for conservation. And you have to know who's in charge in each one.
Right. And that's, I think, we would be looking at that as we move forward with this, of how the review process would proceed, whether it would be coming to the Historic Resource Commission or it would be reviewed administratively. But I think that's where there's not many examples within the state of New York. That's kind of what we've run into. And so we're trying, we're trying to move forward and see if anybody does have any resources that they know of, nationally.
And
then
also,
yes.
I was gonna say, there's, everybody wants to know more about conservation districts, and there's just not a lot of great examples. So I would, and actually, I know there's a community out on the east end of Long Island that is considering conservation districts as well. Although I'm not really sure where they are in that. So a couple things about that, about the conservation district, is I would recommend keeping it very simple. And seeing this bullet about eligible or designated National Register, I would not, I don't think that should be included in the conservation district, because the idea, to me at least, is that a conservation district would be for districts that would not necessarily meet that standard and rise to either National Register and or local designation by the HRC. And I will say that in other communities, like Buffalo doesn't have conservation districts, but the Buffalo Commission is a lot more liberal with designation. I mean, we haven't, I don't know when the last time we designated anything, but Buffalo designates stuff, and they designate districts, like the Broadway Fillmore is a really good example, that wouldn't, the full district wouldn't meet National Register criteria. So they are designating things that don't meet NR criteria. And that's something that I would see if we wanted to go in, if the city wanted to go in a conservation district bent, that would be perhaps the way to go. Although there could be benefit to following Buffalo's example and listing those districts as under the preservation ordinance, and perhaps being more thoughtful about particular rules and guidance, and maybe have district-based guidance instead of across the board, that kind of thing. It would be interesting to hear how a district like Broadway Fillmore has worked in Buffalo. But I would also, one more thing, sorry, is that I think a really key part of a conservation district is about demolition and stopping demolition. So it's really, and incentives, but a benefit to local designation, because we're CLG, is it could open up historic tax credits if it can be certified. And if particular state credits become available to things that are just local districts, just state register districts, for example, it has that flexibility. But I don't see demolition as a bullet on here. And to me, a conservation district, the number one concern would be pausing demolition.
Could we almost like create a hypothetical scenario and build off of that? Like, for instance, if Swinburne Park was part of a conservation district, and start thinking about some guidelines or ordinances that we can do to protect that area. I'm just using an example, and I was just.
That's actually a good example.
Right.
Because Swinburne Park, probably in its own right, should be designated historic. But the buildings across the street, like on the other side of Clinton Avenue, are not. And
Mhm.
yet there's another word that we haven't used that wasn't used for a long time and then came up probably 10 or 15 years ago. It was viewscape. And viewscape and neighborhood conservation district is how do you handle things that aren't in your district, that you have no jurisdiction over. But if you take it, and it started with Manassas battlefield, that we all knew about the sacred soil, and across the street, they were tearing down buildings and putting up enormous hotels and motels and things like that, that compromised the resource. And that's what a conservation district could do, similar to the idea of viewscape, that if you draw your magical line, almost like it's a line on a ward, and you have no jurisdiction beyond that line, you could destroy your resource by allowing somebody to really do a horrible job on the district that's across the street. And to the point where nobody wants to look at your district anymore because it's part of a horrible neighborhood. And yet there's no way that you could say that other side definitely belongs on the national or local or state register, because it doesn't and it won't. And yet, if you don't pay attention to it, it will do serious damage to the image and the value of your resource that may be perfectly well protected by law. And so that's where your conservation district would come in, almost like a viewscape, that if you don't do something, it's going to have a very bad effect on the thing that you're trying to protect.
Mhm.
Is there a continuum between these, I guess, what's the relationship of, and is there a continuum for these conservation districts and future districts? So, I mean, it would seem like we could develop a list of those. Some belong in both, some whatever.
Right.
I totally concur with Aaron's comment about demolition. And I think what I'm hearing from you, Jack, is that it is the other side of the street boundary of the historic districts or resources that we're trying to protect in order to, for the district's sake. So those are two items, but I guess it'd be good to see a list or, you know, a sketch out on a map as to where these are and which ones we think will or should be designated to the registers
Mhm.
versus which will just remain as these kind of fringe boundary districts.
Yeah, and I didn't put it in here, and I think it is in the document that I sent to you all. And there's like a brief kind of start of a list of some of the areas that the consultants had identified.
Yeah.
But I think we can definitely, you know, maybe this is part of it. I mean, I don't foresee this action item in some of these items. I don't foresee like being finished by the end of 2021. You know, these are something that will most likely, we need to kind of work through them and establish kind of, you know, implementation for them. But I think, you know, yeah, I think it would be very good to have your input as to some of the areas where, you know, they might be fringe, or we might have seen kind of a loss of materials and we need something in place to help protect like further loss and deterioration of the neighborhoods. So I can definitely share what the consultants have put together, and then maybe kind of roughly map it out, and then we can go from there and kind of produce some further areas that may qualify and work through it. But if anybody,
It almost feels to me that of the buildings, so our neighborhood conservation districts presumably will have residences and commercial and some others, maybe small institutional. But oh my gosh, conserving those retail, the commercial uses that support that community feels like even a higher priority than what we might say about the siding materials or some things like that.
Right. And I know that, the way that conservations are, talked about is that they're preservation light. So they might have more flexibility for alternate materials,
Mhm.
replacement of some. So they're usually, at least the way that I've heard them discuss, is that they're a more lenient form of a preservation ordinance.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So these next few action items kind of go hand in hand. The demolition notification provision we had worked on last year during 2020. The HRC had formulated what they would like to see in a notification provision, what information should be provided, once a emergency demolition has been declared. Richard Conti, council member Conti, has put forward a new ordinance that we had briefly discussed at the last HRC meeting, looking to put into law an emergency notification process for the Historic Resource Commission. This would be a post declaration notification. So once an emergency action, whether demolition or stabilization, is declared, the HRC would be notified and provided with the report that goes with that action item. It does what Councilmember Conti is putting forward generally reflects what is listed under action item 3.6, and goes along with the preservation plan and what the commission had asked for last year. You still have the chance, and we will be discussing it at the next workshop meeting, to provide comments and feedback and further review of the item before it goes through the land use committee, common council land use committee meeting. Also coming out of the land use committee meeting that John and I had attended on January 7th, and it's action item 3.5, is the creation of an early warning system. This is something that I've been discussing internally with Sam Wells to see how we can use city resources like building blocks to start looking at properties within historic districts. So when things like a zero water read or property maintenance complaints come in, we can start to populate buildings that have the potential of becoming vacant or are in the early stages of vacancy. This, I think, would go hand in hand with HRC's involvement as we move forward with understanding the building department's emergency demolition and vacancy rules and procedures. And I think,
and the emergency demolition pretty clearly, it's more of what decides a stabilization effort. I don't want to switch the subject, but
I think that can be something that we bring up, at a future discussion with the building department and Rick LaJoy, is how it's determined whether a building can be stabilized and what constitutes, what kind of pushes a stabilization over kind of the line and into demolition. And I know there was a letter shared, Marilyn, Aaron, and John, who worked on putting together a letter to Richard Conti And that is something, you know, we can work through. And Rick LaJoy is willing to kind of provide us with further information and meet with us to discuss the building department's procedures. So that's definitely something that we can kind of flesh out.
No, I think they were, you know, the outcome of that meeting, they were open to massaging some of the language here in the proposed revision to the ordinance. So that, you know, it does address some of these issues. It's a little vague now with, you know, the role of the HRC, and certainly recognizing the difference between emergency demolitions, which should become fewer and fewer, hopefully, once the early warning system and the information that's being gathered and the triage that's being done. And I think that's where we can begin to introduce the idea of stabilizations as an alternative to demolition. And I
Yeah,
know Rick LaJoy was saying that he was hoping that, you know, in 3 years' time, there won't even be any more emergency demolitions. Now, hopefully that doesn't mean they've already demolished everything that
That's about the only way.
necessary, but, you know, I think getting some of these structures in place and having a more periodic dialogue with the building department on these issues so that we can be a partner with them in trying to look for, you know, if they see something that's emerging as a problem, you know, do we all get together and look for strategies to bring it back from the brink so that it doesn't eventually become an emergency?
right. And that's with the with the early warning system. One of the things is, you know, it would work hand in hand with a number of the programs that the city is already doing, the stabilization, the new emergency rental program, of hopefully being able to address a lot of, you know, potential vacancy issues early on so that we're able to, you know, stabilize and rehab these buildings before they go into vacancy. And then also, if need be, working to identify local partners who might be able to take on those structures and rehab them. You know, one of the things that we have discussed there, though, is running into where properties are under private ownership and getting them, you know, how do we transfer those properties from, you know, someone who can't handle the property to someone who can take that property and turn it around and rehab it. But if we can kind of catch those buildings early, we might be able to, you know, transfer them or, you know, hit them early and get them rehabbed and, you know, stop the circular vacancy issue that we're seeing that could potentially end in emergency demolition. But we will discuss the emergency demolition notification first process at the February 3rd HRC meeting workshop. I will be sending out the ordinance and law, and we will need to be, I would ask you all to kind of come with comments and feedback on both the amendments to the membership and the emergency demolition process so that we can have something, either a memo or something in writing to send to the land use committee meeting, so that what they're proposing to do reflects what, you know, the information the HRC needs in order to review and make potential recommendations on the city's procedures. Because I believe we need that to them by the end of February, beginning of March. I know that Kara is on the call, but just real quick, one of the action items was the creation of a rehab fair. So Historic Albany Foundation has started a restoration fair. The first fair was both a public lecture series and presentation series with city organizations, local organizations, and in collaboration with the Albany County Land Bank, where they held open houses and for multiple properties, specifically in the South End. They started in 2019, where they also held a virtual fair starting in May through the summer online over Facebook and Zoom. So this has been great. They've been collaborating with a lot of local organizations. They've had great attendance. If at the end, maybe Kara wants to expand a little bit more, but bringing together, contractors, how to purchase a building, what funds are available. They've been the fairs have been a great resource for gathering information for potential property owners and owners of historic structures, or just an interest in historic preservation in the city of Albany. So we're willing to help them in whatever way to keep this going. I think if HRC, if they're willing to have HRC's involvement, I've done a couple presentations on the certificate of appropriateness process. They've done presentations on permitting. It's a great resource. So hopefully this May we'll have another one. And I would definitely encourage you all to either attend or get involved in some way.
Yeah, I participated in the last 2 years of the Restoration Fair, and I think they were a success. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe a few people became more educated, but it was a success, and it really was. It was fun.
Yeah, I think it's great because, if you want to just come and sit through some presentations, you're able to do that. But if you want to talk to somebody one-on-one and get information, there's tables set up for people to come and talk to organizations and vendors, and it's been a great resource.
Outreach.
One of the other under policy 4.2, which is education and advocacy of getting information out to residents, providing them with educational information and advocating for preservation within the city of Albany. One of the items that we've identified that the planning department has kind of felt that, we can do some of this internally on our own. We can reach out to the city historian as well as HRC members to help produce these. Are the 4 different educational brochures that can live, online or hard copies. We have some people within our office that can format, or we can reach out to, a local graphic designer to help us kind of format and produce these. The two that I think the HRC could help on is, researching how to research your property. So where do you go? What information is helpful when you're applying to do a project on your property? And then also funding sources. So if, what funds are available if you're looking to rehab a property, state, local, any of that. So if anyone has interest in helping kind of produce kind of the meat and body and information for these, definitely reach out, because I think this is something that could be quick and easy, and it works into the next couple action items.
Karen, I'll offer to kind of take on the initial research anyway on the funding.
Perfect.
because I'm doing something similar for the South End.
Okay.
So therefore, some of those funds through community development, there's like 3 or 4 different sources that are kind of hard to track otherwise in Albany. So we all know
Yeah.
the Fed and we know the state. I will ask a question though, Aaron Tobin, maybe you know the answer to this. The tax, I think the big thing about the federal tax credits, not the state, if I'm correct, but the federal tax credits are hard to use. They're not, right? I mean, it's not every mom and pop or every individual property owner that can use those based on passive loss restrictions and a whole bunch of other things that I can barely even rattle off right now. Do you know, Aaron? Kind of followed that? Because if we put out, we don't want to say federal tax credits if we know that many of the project types that we're seeing wouldn't qualify.
Well, right now, yes. I mean, it's the rare property owner that can do a federal historic tax credit application without significant professional help.
No, that's not, I'm not concerned about that. I understand the complexity of the process. My question is really about some of the not the accounting, but who can use the credit and who cannot use the credit. It can be very hard to use as an I mean, I've gone through the IRS regs on that, and it can be hard to use. So maybe no one here knows the answer right now, but I think
I didn't, but I guess I'm not understanding the question. I mean, who can use the credit? You have to be a for-profit entity.
right.
So that's not a question that we hear a lot. I don't often hear a lot of confusion over who can and can't use it. I get questions from nonprofits, so it has to be clear that they're different. But I'm trying. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand the answer to the question. How to answer the question, because I'm not quite sure I'm clear on the question. I mean, the federal credit, I think, is and remains a good one to promote because it can be used for big projects or small projects. There's the adjusted.
With the small projects.
It is challenging for small projects, but not impossible. And I mean, Chris could probably speak to that better, but I don't think, and of course, we're all right now in the federal government, they're trying to figure out, there's several bills in that would make the federal program easier to use. I wouldn't hang my hat on anything, but I guess I would say it's not typically a big issue in terms of challenging use, and groups like Historic Albany or the Preservation League do so many tax credit programs focused on this issue. I know Historic Albany has done one, and we've done one that on how to join the federal program with a historic homeowner if you have a duplex or live in a unit and rent the others. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for use. I'm still not sure I answered your question. I might be answering something totally different.
No, you're answering around it. And I wonder if Chris has anything to add to this, because what I'm saying and what I'm hearing is that the credits can be very difficult to use for small projects if you're a non-realtor, you don't have an LLC. So you've got that nice little 2-family and you want to do, and you qualify in all ways, but how do you use the credit? Can you use the credit? Chris, have you run into this?
Oh, a lot of times we use both the federal historic tax credit and the state with Michael Gahuli's projects. And they were investment properties. It wasn't his primary residence. What else could I say to it? There's a percentage and a ratio of how much money is being put into the building, how large the rehab is.
That's the adjusted basis test. Yeah, you have to do the adjusted basis test, which is one of the things they're trying to fix. But that's often a barrier. In higher market regions, that's more of a barrier. Albany, less so.
I'll follow up on this. I don't think I'm obviously not even doing a good job framing the question, but I think there are some concerns that remain as to how to use the credit. That's maybe kind of weedy, but when I take this on, I'll get into that. I'll call like McCroskey or somebody like that and get a good answer. I hope I'm wrong.
Hold on, Kara has raised her hand. She might have information on it. Kara?
I don't know if it's necessarily more information, but I think it's more potentially clarifying Marilyn's question. I think the issue isn't necessarily, or the question isn't really who's eligible. It's how does the money get to the developer family doing the project? Like I said, it's a credit, so it's not that they're sending you a check. So it's how does that get back to them? Is that what you're asking, Marilyn? Because it's not as straightforward.
No.
Okay.
My question
I
is
misunderstood it then. Never mind.
if you're a tiny little single property owner versus
Yeah.
developer, can you really use those credits? And there's some language in the IRS regs that make it very, very difficult for some projects. But I'll follow up on it because nobody else seems to think there's a problem. Maybe I'm wrong.
We don't hear, I'll just say, we don't hear that as being a big issue because you have, usually if you have a business, you formed some sort of corporate entity to take that revenue in and you can spread it out. The issue is that often people with small businesses don't have the tax liability. So it's not so much, it's more that they just can't use it because they don't have the tax liability, which is why they bring in an investor. And that's something that can be complicated for a small business owner to try to piece together, but there's plenty of professional help groups like McCroskey who can help small business owners figure that out. But we worked with very small projects, small, tiny Main Street buildings, 2-unit rentals, and they've all used the credit.
Okay.
And I think, that's kind of like, I mean, in simple terms, kind of fleshing out, how do you qualify, who qualifies and what funds, are available to somebody, and having that in one easy place,
I mean,
for somebody to be, the lay person to be able to just kind of understand it and go forward and use those funds that are available to them. And if anybody does have any interest in helping with creating something for how to research your property, where do you go? What kind of documents, do you want to be looking at, and where you can find those? How to kind of read that information, and how it's helpful. I think, we've discussed reaching out to Tony Opelka to help us with that. But if anybody else has any interest and would like to help with that, it would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I'll help out. I'll help out with that. I'll talk with you, Erin, at some point soon.
Okay.
About my involvement in there.
Perfect.
And I'd put out asking Historic Albany too,
Yes.
because they have the expertise. We're doing a program on that. Our Southern Tier consultant's doing a program on how to research your historic building. I think Cindy Falk is speaking, or Katie Como. But that's going to be more generic, and I think it would be useful to have specifically go to the Hall of Records. Like, here's what you can find at the Hall of Records.
Yeah. Or like, the Albany room is open, between these hours on these nights, and this is, what, if you're looking to see who lived at your property, these are the documents, you can look at. So, and with that, it's kind of one of the things we discussed, then where do these documents, where does all this information live? The city of Albany, we briefly brought this up at the last HRC meeting. We have launched a new website, which is great. It's much more user-friendly, easy to navigate. We're able to kind of build out our pages as we would like to see them, with the information that we would like to see available to residents. So we're currently working on kind of beefing up the Historic Resource Commission. I'll be reaching out to each of you for bios and photos, so that, you know, residents know, you know, who their applications are being reviewed by, who to expect at meetings, and what your background is. And then kind of on, this isn't live, well, not all this is live, but, you know, we're starting to build out pages where we can display the historic districts. So you'll know if your district is locally designated, or, you know, just national, on the National Register, or if it's both. You know, easy to find the Historic Resource Overlay Ordinance. You know, those the educational brochures would live here as well as other resources, where to go to find funding. You know, we have.
When is this going to be completed on the city's section?
We're working on it. So some of this, you know, will be, it might be down the road. We're trying to get up as much information as quickly as possible. But it is there for us to start to build it out and post information. So, you know, I would ask for your bios and your pictures, you know, as soon as possible. I may start just reaching out to each of you individually so that we can work on getting that together, and either scheduling a time where we can socially distance take your picture, or if you have a picture to provide, that we can then put up. But some of these, it might be a little while as we kind of produce information, but we are working on getting it up and getting it rolling. So it will be very nice because everything will be in one place, and, you know, really build out kind of a preservation page with all kind of the local preservation programs information, and other, you know, what other local organizations are doing as well. So. But so those, you know, it's a lot of information and a lot of things to be working on. This is only a really small chunk of the action items from the preservation plan. But I mean, if any of you still have any questions or want to discuss anything further, we can do that now. So.
We get from a big, long, big, complicated list like this to a workable list that's got assignments and schedule and priority and is reasonable, so that can really make progress, understand what you're doing, understand what you need from us, etc. How do we get there?
I think one of the things that I can start doing is, you know, this is a lot of information, but some of you have expressed interest in some of the goals and items. And so I think one of the things is maybe starting to break off a little bit, have some offline discussions, and create some working groups, and identifying, you know, whether it's Historic Albany Foundation or it's working with the Land Bank, you know, other city agencies, starting to kind of create some small working groups that we can kind of start biting off some of this work and moving it forward. But like I said, some of this, you know, I think just starting the discussion about some of these action items, and maybe it's every once in a while we kind of pick an item from this list and discuss it so that we can move it forward. I don't necessarily expect that all of them the goal isn't to have them necessarily completed by the end of 2021, but at least moving forward. But I can, I've been jotting some notes so I can start to reach out to some of you to have further discussions.
I'm gonna have to bow out, like I told
Mhm.
Erin earlier. But I will give you a call, Erin, maybe tomorrow or Tuesday. We can further discuss my role in all of this.
Okay. That'd
Look
be
forward
perfect.
to hashing all of this out. There's a lot to hash out, just like Marilyn said.
Yeah.
So good night all, and I'll be with you, talk with you soon, Erin.
All right.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks,
Night,
Lee.
Lee.
Good night.
Good night.
I also am going to have to leave in about 3 or 4 minutes. I had a brief reprieve from 7, but I have to go in a couple minutes.
That's
And-
fine.
And none of you noticed in back of me, the
I did.
I did.
character that's waiting for us to break so we can get back into the celebration.
Well, I think in the beginning we said like a 7:15, right, Jack?
It was 7 to 7:15. I think it's a special day that may be cutting into our concentration.
It
Yeah.
is. It is a great day, huh?
It is.
Yep.
Anybody get to see the parade?
Yeah,
I had that on the side, and then I wanted to go see it on a bigger. That was really something. The whole day was just fantastic,
yeah, it was.
including the early morning activities.
Oh, yeah.
I like those too. Yeah.
Before Aaron signs off, I will be sending out Richard Conti's amendment to the law and the proposed ordinance. I would like each of you to come prepared to the next commission meeting with comments and feedback and on both of them, so that we can be ready and put something together to send to the Common Council Land Use Committee, so that we can really get that emergency notification moving forward, but also reflecting what you all would like to see, as you will be the board that will be most impacted by it.
Aaron, why don't you give some bulletins of what the agenda is going to be?
Yes, I will.
Instead of 45 pages and so on. What do you think we can really discuss? Where would be the key items? Just bullets, not
Yes.
explanations.
Yeah.
I will,
An agenda under agenda.
I will take the comments that John, Marilyn, and Aaron have put together, as well as some other items to discuss that I know you and I had discussed, Jack, some of the things with the emergency demolition after the last meeting. So I will include all that in there for discussion.
Okay.
And we can go from there.
Just something really quick, because I'm looking at you, Jack. You weren't here last time, and I brought up that if had you been there, we would have been talking about documentation of the buildings.
Yes.
But I've been doing this South End survey, and what I'm finding out is that when we're doing the documentation, we want to be sure to add that, get as many elevations as possible, including, of course, the sides and the rear, which you may get from another street, because there's a lot of information on changes over time to that building and or early sections of that building that you don't see from the facade.
Yes.
So I'm just spewing that because I don't want to forget it.
That's a good point.
But do any of you have any questions?
I think you froze, Aaron.
Yeah.
Does that mean we can go back to the party?
I'm willing to offer a motion that we
Motion to
adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning and thanking Erin for all of her hard work in
Erin.
laying this out for
Thank
us,
you, Erin.
and we'll all be in touch.
All
Okay,
right.
good
Bye-bye.
discussion. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank
Real
you.
quick, you still there?
Yeah, what's up?
Marilyn, a question for you with the Women's Club. Any motion for anything moving forward there? Did we miss the meeting?
Well, we bid it and the bids came in, just about twice as high.
Yeah, we took, me and the Mason went over there the other day and took a good look, but I missed the 15th meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. John, is that your experience? You seeing your bids coming in? Are you guys kind of what you're hearing? Your bids are coming in real high.
Yeah. Yeah, they tend to be coming in high.
Yeah. Is that, Chris, when you're looking at projects, are you kind of seeing big changes in material? I mean, certainly the availability of stuff we know and wood, but what else you seeing?
I can understand why we're seeing inflated costs and stuff like that with the distribution and the unknowing and the delay and, what could change
Labor
everything?
shortage as
Stop
well.
that project.
Yeah.
What might get in the way of stopping that project might force someone to, well.
Right.
I think the supply chain on a lot of things is still disrupted.
Yep.
Well, I know if you want a bicycle of a particular color and you ordered it today, you might get it in August.
Yeah.
Over your ass bids.
I know that. Yeah. All right.
Good night, all. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you all.
All right, good night.
For the,
Bye.
Well.